Listen, kids, I'm on the webinar. Okay.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Nourish Network webinar. We'll just wait a couple of more minutes while other people join and then we'll get started. Okay, I think most people are here. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Hello, my name is Victoria Hobbs. I'm the coordinator for the Nourish Network. And thank you for joining us for the webinar Levers for Change, Identifying Strategies for Local Government Associations and Communities to Support Food Retailers to Move to Healthier Food Provision. Our presenters will be sharing the journeys they've been on to help the move to healthy food, from creating evidence-based research to the planning and development phases, and finally, the successful implementation of healthy and sustainable food environments. A brief agenda for today. First up, we will hear from Dr. Miranda Blake, we'll have acknowledgement and welcome to country. And then we'll hear from Dr. Miranda Blake of Deakin University. And then Leah Galvin, representing the Huon Valley Food Hub. And then Matthew Moylan and Amy Brown from Healthy Greater Bendigo. And finally, we'll have a panel with speakers and audience questions. We're hoping to finish by about 10 to 2 to give people a chance to have a break between meetings. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledgement of country. As we gather here for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognise the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We acknowledge the elders, past, present and emerging, of all the land in which we work and live on, and their ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect, and to recognise the continuing connection to land, water and community. I also pay my respects to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present today. So welcome. By way of introduction, Many of you already know of our work or work with the Nourish Network, but for those of you who don't, Nourish Network is a multi-sector collective working to increase demand, availability, and access to healthy, sustainable, and affordable food. The Nourish Network is an initiative of Deakin University's Institute for Health Transformation, and we're based in Victoria, Australia. It's headed up by our director, the wonderful Professor Anna Peters. So some general housekeeping. If you can please keep your microphones on mute, it would be most appreciated. And if you have questions, please pop them in the chat box as we go, or if you can raise your hand during question time after the presenters are finished. Okay, without further ado, I would like to introduce and welcome our first presenter, Dr. Miranda Blake. Miranda is a research fellow from the Global Obesity Centre in Deakin University's Institute for Health Transformation. Miranda will discuss how local government academic partnerships can enhance local government policy and practice and generate impactful research. She will outline how the Nourish Network Local Government Food Policy Research Action Team is fostering academic local government partnerships. Miranda will present research from the Global Obesity Centre on how different levers can be used to drive healthy food retail systems change in local government settings. Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you, Victoria.
I'll just stop sharing.
Okay, can everyone see that? Great.
Yep.
So I'm here today to talk about how we can use evidence to inform practice and practice to inform evidence generation in the context of healthy food retail initiatives. Today I'm presenting from the traditional lands, the Wurundjeri Wurrung people, and I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging of the lands on which we are meeting, and also pay my respects to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here with us today. Today we're going to hear several examples of how evidence can be used to inform practice, including the generation of effective strategies for local change to support healthy food systems. Evidence-based practice is about using evidence to design, implement and improve programs and interventions, and using evidence-based practice is more likely to lead to selection of strategies which are effective for achieving their target outcomes. So for example, it might include considering the importance of context when designing what kind of resources might be needed to support a program. On the other side, practice-based evidence is where the expertise of practitioners is integrated into the research process. So this could include things like during research question development, design, funding, recruitment, intervention and implementation planning, and also dissemination, or how we get this research out there into the hands of practitioners. Practice-based evidence is more likely to lead to evidence that is useful, both in its content and delivery. And local government academic partnerships are an opportunity to bring these two concepts together for bidirectional learning. Therefore, it can strengthen both research and practice. And some examples of projects that have brought these concepts together include the Eat Well at IGA Healthy Supermarket Research Trial and Project, and the Healthy Supermarket Community of Practice. And I believe that Amy's going to touch on these a bit later. The second example is the Local Food Policy Index project, which the Nourish Network Food Policy Research Action Team is currently contributing to. So a bit of background on the action team. The mission of the Nourish Network Local Government Food Policy Research Team is to enhance and accelerate research and evidence-based policy action to improve the healthiness and environmental sustainability of food environments in local government settings in Australia. We have membership from around Australia, including researchers, local government practitioners, and people working to support practitioners. Activities include hearing about what kind of projects different groups are working on, sharing resources and knowledge, upcoming professional development opportunities and events, and hearing from guest speakers. We also work on a couple of targeted projects together, which work towards the mission of the group. And one of these such projects is the Local Food Policy Index Project, or the Local Food EPI project. The Food EPI tool and process has previously been applied at the state and federal level in Australia and also in 20 countries internationally. The Local Food EPI project is funded by Vic Health. It's a partnership project led by Associate Professor Gary Sachs at Deakin University, along with City of Greater Bendigo and La Trobe University. And the Local Food EPI project will help to develop a tool to benchmark local governments in Victoria on the implementation of policies that support healthy and sustainable food systems. The project will be implemented in the City of Greater Bendigo, and then we'll get feedback on the feasibility, usability, and perceived value of the tool for the City of Greater Bendigo. And then it'll be made available for wider use. The Nourish Network Action Team is acting as an advisory group for this project. And that includes in contributing to the development of domains of action. So that's things like food procurement and what specific indicators or actions local governments can take to progress those domains. So for example, that might include implementing a healthy catering policy in council settings. This project is still in its early phases, but I encourage you to watch this space, and hopefully it will be a useful tool down the track that you can use in your own communities. An example of a project which has previously brought together theory with real-world experience with practitioners to advance both evidence and practice is the START map. The START map, or the systems thinking approach for retail transformation, was developed at the Global Obesity Centre, including by myself and my co-lead, Dr. Tara Balsam-Robertson. Its purpose is to help researchers and health promotion practitioners to map out the usual cause and effect pathways leading to successful implementation of healthy food retail strategies. And it focuses on the context of an organisation who's working with retailers towards healthy changes. So for example, like a local government. It's based on a systems thinking approach, which acknowledges that implementing healthy food retail initiatives is complex, lots of people involved, lots of things going on at once. And it's also a dynamic process, so it changes over time and in different contexts. START map identifies potential leverage points or points of action and acknowledges potential tensions or unintended consequences of actions. I don't have time to go into the details of the methods of the development today, but just briefly, it was based on 4 case studies in healthy food retail initiatives in Victoria, including 2 in local government settings and 2 in healthcare settings. And those evaluations included 26 interviews with people who were involved in implementing those changes. So this map seeks to capture their perspectives and experiences. So the START map uses 5 different narrative stories or loops to describe how cause and effect relationships can play out in healthy food retail interventions. So here's one example. So this one's called Explore Sources of Resource Support. And so if we start here with organisational resourcing, as there is greater organisational resourcing in a local government, for example, this can decrease the outlet, staff, manager, or owner time resource required to participate in healthy changes. So that's a negative relationship there. So as organisational resourcing goes up, the time required to participate goes down. This in turn leads to increased manager or owner willingness to participate in healthy changes. Organisational resourcing, such as through a health promotion practitioner, can also be used to form relationships and build trust with retailers. And so again, that can increase the decision makers' willingness to participate in making changes. As changes are actually implemented over time, this can increase organisational leadership because it decreases the risk that organisations take in making changes. If changes are already happening, then they can see momentum and it makes sense for organisations to support further change. The 2 inputs we've got here to organisational resourcing, leadership and external practical support can be considered as additive factors. So both of these factors can be activated to increase organisational resourcing. So external practical support could be something like the Healthy Eating Advisory Service, which provides expertise to help organisations to transition to healthy change. Population acceptance of healthy retail, up the top here, is a powerful factor in driving both support and resourcing for healthy change. And that's because it represents customer demand for change, basically. However, it's quite difficult within the system of an organisation to affect population acceptance of healthy retail. So you'll see there are no input arrows in this diagram into population acceptance. However, over time, as more and more organisations implement healthy changes, population acceptance can go up overall. So the takeaway from this particular story or narrative is that there are lots of different ways to influence organisational resourcing directly or indirectly. And I'd like to just summarise finally in the words of a practitioner about the key message of this narrative, that supportive environments, I think, is key to making this sort of stuff happen. Sometimes you have those supportive environments and sometimes you have to create them. The Start My project has received funding from the Deakin Institute for Health Transformation and the Australian Prevention Partnership Centre for further funding to develop this current sort of theoretical concept map into a practical tool for practitioners. And we're going to be running a series of workshops later this year towards that development. If you'd like to find out more about that, please do get in touch with myself. And I think that Sian's going to put my email address into the chat. And you can also go to that link to find out more about the paper itself. You can also contact me for further information on the Nourish Network Action Team or the Start Map. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Miranda. That was fantastic, and so great to hear about the research and evidence-based side of things that informs practice. Okay, next up we have Leah Galvin. Leah is representing the Huon Valley Food Hub and will share with us the journey from concept to funding for the Huon Valley Food Hub, including the critical success factors such as cross-sectoral engagement and partnerships for planning, and the importance of a supportive policy environment. Leah will present on behalf of the Huon Valley Council, who are the grant fund holder and lead for the project. Thanks, Leah.
Thanks very much. So great to be joining you all. So my presentation is basically about levers to get you from idea to action. I'm joining you today from the land of the Malakati people of the Southeast Nation of Lutruwita. This project has actually been funded by the Tasmanian government through their Healthy Tasmania grant scheme. And as it was mentioned, it's being led by the Huon Valley Council. So as with all the good stuff, it started with conversations. And really the initiator was a colleague of mine, Michael Higgins from the Geeston Community Centre. And he was right in the middle of it all, having conversations with different people and really sort of activating discussions around what we should do in the food system space in the Huon Valley. The Food Hub model had long been in conversations in Tasmania, especially amongst practitioners. So what Michael and I did was actually call a half-day planning session and invited along some friends. What's important to note is that the first concept workshop that we held was cross-sectoral in representation. So right from the start, we had people that were farmers, community organisations, local and state government, peak bodies, and also regional development. So here's where we landed after that half-day workshop. I'm not going to go through all of this, but suffice to say, we had very good problem definition because we have a variety of different perspectives. We discovered that actually all of us had a set of shared mutual values, which was really great. And we were very mindful of what the enablers might be. What I wanted to just quickly show you here is, on the next slide, is that if you do have cross-sectoral representation in this sort of concept planning phase, you can end up with ideas from right across the food system. So this is just going to highlight each of the potential functions for the hub that came from this meeting. So you start with community, that's where we always start. And we were thinking about connection and healthy local food system and how we could strengthen the local food culture, because that's sort of fundamental to this work. Another possible function for the hub would be around coordination, networking, connections and partnerships, and that's right across the food system again. Distribution, logistics and aggregation is a fairly common function of food hubs internationally, particularly around coordination of delivery and managing supply contracts. The hub has the potential to perhaps act as a food bank, coordinate donations of food, and to create a local safety net, which we now know from our experience during COVID is just absolutely essential for a resilient food system. Production and planning is something that could be a possible function. This has got real benefits for growers and also smoothing out any sort of lumpiness in local supply. We want the values of the potential hub to be cooperative and for there to be shared success. There'll be some sort of educative function, whether it's for business or community, we're not sure. Remember, this is just our starting points for what could be the possible elements of the hub. This is absolutely critical, business to business engagement through the hub. Because we need to be solving some sort of problem for business for them to become engaged and interested in it. Outlet and retail function is another possibility through direct sales, box schemes, and increasing the availability of great local food wherever people go about their daily lives. And then another possible function is through procurement and brokerage. So that's looking at scaled up sort of supply, which all sorts of growers could be engaged in. So when we look at what the project outcomes that we're looking for, I should say first that the project's funded to be delivered over the next 14 to 18 months, and it's really only just started in the last few weeks. So these are the sort of key milestones that are involved, and that is appointing a project officer to lead the project, and hello to Emily Samuels Ballantyne, who may be on the line and has recently been appointed in that role. She'll be establishing the project governance. There'll be mapping of the local food system. That's a critical thing to do, and those sort of possible functions of the food hub do steer you towards what sort of information might be valuable to collect and understand. There'll be a co-design process and also some community engagement via social media and online surveys, the like. One of the things that we're looking for as an important outcome of the project is building capacity within the council workforce so they understand what their role is and how it actually connects to the local food system. There'll be a series of 4 activation events. So this is almost like a prototyping phase for the project to demonstrate what the possible functions of the hub might look like. So at this stage of the project, you don't know what they'll be. They'll come out of the co-design process. And then the real legacy pieces of this 14 to 18 month project will be establishing a Huon Valley Food Hub Coalition. They'll have carriage of the hub's progress beyond the project, and we're also going to be developing a business plan for the hub so that we can understand the feasibility of it. Key levers. So why did this work? Well, we really regained momentum again last year when the grant became available. So an expression of interest process came up. And we knew that the proposition of the hub was strong because the local government policy environment was very supportive. And we felt like we had all of our ducks in place. We had good support from the local producers and community organisations and those shared values. So if I think about the things that really made a difference, we had the leadership to get started. It really has to be somebody's job to bring people together, and that's absolutely critical. We started with a diverse range of partners and actors from across the food system and policymakers, and that helped us to really define the problems from different perspectives And also we knew that the problems sat well within the social determinants of health framework. It captures things like food security and employment, and that would be attractive to public health, who were the funder. We invested in the design piece, so that infographic that I showed earlier. Infographics are incredibly powerful ways to communicate complex ideas and concepts. I've found they work really effectively. I'll mention again the policy and strategy context of the local government. It really is incredibly strong for delivering a project like this. There's a variety of different strategies that cross over or it intersects with. So there's a health and wellbeing strategy, there's a workforce planning strategy, there's a council plan which is committed to supporting artisan producers, food and culinary tourism. There's an economic development strategy which identifies agriculture / horticulture as key sectors, and even local branding of the council area is really important, because it's a very big part of the cultural identity of people that live in the Huon Valley. For folks that don't know, it's about a 30-minute drive from south of Hobart. The other is serendipity, and of course money, but you have to be ready for this kind of opportunity when it comes up. You really need to have one in your drawer so you can say, here's one I prepared earlier. The grant application process was actually relatively straightforward to write because we were so well prepared and had good support from people in the region. And we also knew that public health were more likely to support a project if it was coming from the economic development area of local government. And I knew that just from my past experience working with them. I wanted to thank you very much for your interest. Thank you to Victoria and Sian for organising today. And can I just acknowledge my colleagues who may be on the line, Michelle Gledhill, who's the Manager of Economic Development at the Huon Valley Council. I've also already mentioned Emily Samuels-Ballantyne, but best wishes for a successful delivery of this project. And lastly, Michael Higgins from Geeson Community Centre, who really was the catalyst for getting us started. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Leah. That was amazing. Really loved hearing about that story, and I can't wait to visit the Huon Valley and see what you're doing down there.
We can't wait to welcome you all back, can I say?
Hopefully when it's a bit warmer. Okay, next up we have Amy Brown and Matthew Moylan from Healthy Greater Bendigo. So Amy is the Executive Officer at Healthy Greater Bendigo, and Matthew is the Population Health Officer, Communications and Development. Amy and Matt will reflect on a range of Healthy Greater Bendigo's efforts to create healthy and sustainable food retail environments, leveraging the UNESCO City of Gastronomy designation, highlighting the co-benefits of healthy and sustainable changes to food environments and use of various levers to change through Healthy Greater Bendigo's partnership approach. Thank you, Matt and Amy.
Thank you, Victoria. We're very happy to be here today. Amy and I want to acknowledge that the City of Greater Bendigo is on Dja Dja Djurong and Taungurung country, and we value that they're letting us deliver this project from their land. So this presentation aims to touch on a range of interventions across the food system to demonstrate the breadth of effort in the Greater Bendigo community. And we will touch on Healthy Greater Bendigo's approach, the breadth of effort, and an overview of our key pieces of work. You're welcome to follow up with us for more information about anything that you're interested in. Healthy Greater Bendigo is an alliance of 7 organisations who believe in change through action, strength through diversity, and power through collaboration. To guide our work, we use a systems thinking approach. We've adopted this model of systems change, and it underpins a lot of the work that we do. It focuses on policies, practices, resource flows, relationships and connections, power dynamics, and mental models. We recommend reading the short Waters for Systems Change article by FSG that this model comes from. Events like today provide an opportunity for all of us to look at the different levers that can be pulled to support food service retailers to move to healthier food service provision. Amy will share some of Greater Bendigo's initiatives aimed at doing this shortly. When Amy shares these initiatives, see if you can find the link to this, a condition of systems change on this diagram. Is it a change in policy, a practice, resource flow, relationship, power dynamic, or is it working on people's mental models? When you're planning your projects and collaborations, a focus on these 6 conditions may help change or help set the scope and priority of your actions. So how do we do it at Healthy Greater Bendigo? We focus in 4 areas. We champion the movement. We encourage people and organisations to make change. Each person and business has their own sphere of influence to increase the health of their communities. And we encourage food service providers and customers to recognise the power they have to make healthy changes. Secondly, we do it together. We build relationships in order to facilitate this work and coordinate our efforts to increase the scope of change. We look across Greater Bendigo for opportunities to bring together the people who are working on improving access to healthy foods, as well as those providing healthy foods, to get cross-community collaboration. Thirdly, we focus on the system. As mentioned before, to know where to focus our efforts, we use that systems change model to guide us in our work. And fourth, we love to celebrate at Healthy Greater Bendigo. What we like to do is to celebrate the health promotion work already happening in our community. We use every lever we have to promote people doing great work using the City of Greater Bendigo and Healthy Greater Bendigo websites and social media channels, as well as those of our partners to promote food service retailers moving to healthier foods. Over recent years, we've seen an increasing commitment by Greater Bendigo to invest in the local food system. This has been demonstrated through investments in a range of partnerships that bring people and organisations together, supporting them to make change within and across their spheres of influence to make it easier to eat well. The commitment by City of Greater Bendigo includes a food systems officer, food systems strategy, healthy facilities, the Healthy Heart of Victoria initiative, the Active Living Census, and our team, the Healthy Greater Bendigo. Our region has also invested in good quality, fine-grained local data to really understand what's happening at a local level in small towns, suburbs, groups of interest. The Active Living Census provides incredible detail about Greater Bendigo's residents' health and wellbeing behaviours and needs. It's the first data of its kind, and it's driving equitable decision-making and investment in our region. What we're really focusing on is the co-benefits of healthy eating, healthy bodies, healthy minds, a healthy climate and environment, and importantly, a healthy local economy to grow the breadth of involvement in the cross-sectoral and community movement for healthy food. Health is everyone's business, and everyone can champion a healthy and equitable, sustainable food system wherever they are and whoever they talk to. And I'm going to hand over to Amy now, who's going to give an overview of some of our projects, starting with the Active Living Census.
Thanks, Matt. So even those local councils without an active living census have loads of data. We aim to make our data work harder by linking various data sets together. So the example that you've got on the screen here shows the overweight and obesity rates in the Bendigo urban area collected through our active living census. And then this next slide here highlights the locations of our drive-through fast food outlets. Fine-grained local data like this has been a really powerful lever to support understanding of the issues in our community related to food, to drive leadership and generate investment in the food system. So this type of data has also helped to inform the development of Greater Bendigo's 10-year multi-stakeholder food system strategy. The strategy articulates the community's vision for a healthy, sustainable and equitable food system, and it guides the actions of the city and 30 other local organisations and community groups to strengthen and support the food system, including healthy food retail. So councils can also create positive change and influence population diet behaviours by increasing physical access to healthy food retail. And I want to give two different types of land use examples here. First, around the use of public land, so the land that councils own, manage, and then the use of the planning scheme, so land use planning, new developments, transport planning, that type of thing. So councils can use their own land to make it easier for communities to physically access healthy and sustainable food retail. So like many councils, Greater Bendigo supports farmers markets by providing highly visible locations and lots of publicity. Many communities also have market gardens to support their local restaurants and cafes to access fresh, healthy produce. I wish we had one of those here, and hopefully we can get one day. We're also looking forward to the construction of a community food hub, a similar model to what Leah just described. Councils also have responsibility for some land use planning and can make their local planning scheme work harder for population health and wellbeing. A couple of years ago, Healthy Greater Bendigo worked with our local planners and consultants who were amending the local planning scheme to identify and utilise local land use policy levers to promote more equitable access to healthy foods across Greater Bendigo. So an outcome of that work is that creating healthy environments is now included under the Greater Bendigo Planning Scheme's strategic direction as the first of 3 key built environment issues for Greater Bendigo. First time that's happened, which is amazing. Other relevant changes include new guidance requiring consideration of whether proposed developments assist with the achievement of 10-minute neighbourhoods, 10-minute neighbourhood principles and access to nutritious food, and also a focus on equitable supermarket expansion to promote better access to healthy food. Some really great work worth checking out. But of course, local councils don't have control over all land use planning issues, as evidenced by the often unsuccessful fights by many communities against fast food outlets that are trying to set up shop. Local planning schemes sit underneath the State Planning Policy Framework and the Planning and Environment Act, which has been identified as arguably the most pivotal legislation for the spatial planning of healthy communities. So we think that these could be good places to focus future research and advocacy. Councils can also utilise various levers to make healthy food more accessible in publicly owned retail outlets. So our community has been funded to trial a range of healthy food and drink nudges in our sport and rec centres through the Vic Health Water in Sport trials and the predecessors of that. The city's also taken opportunities to include healthy choices guidelines in our lease and licence agreements as they've come up for renewal, embedding those requirements into some of our largest sport and rec facilities, those with the greatest patronage. And this work's paved the way for a number of policy responses, including the draft community buildings and healthy facilities policies that embed requirements to provide healthy, safe and sustainable food and drink options in all council-owned, managed or funded facilities and venues, including cafes, kiosks, coffee shops, catering and vending machines as well. And not a local council thing, but I wanted to pay credit to the leadership and the courage of Bendigo Health, our local hospital, whose board decided about 4 years ago that they would not sell any sugary drinks on site. So councils can also influence private food retailers, not just the public ones. So here's a couple of examples. We're leveraging our the UNESCO City of Gastronomy designation to incentivise healthy food production and retail through an associated healthy sub-brand. So it'll be available for local businesses to use under strict conditions, promoting and celebrating healthy food in and from the region. I heard Miranda before mention healthy catering policies. We've certainly implemented one that requires council staff to purchase any catering from suppliers with Healthy Choices approved menus. And this uses council's buying power to encourage local catering businesses to supply healthy options. And we can see more coming on board. A newly adopted itinerant trade policy, which applies to food trucks using public land, incentivises the provision of healthy food options by reducing the fees those retailers have to pay. The implementation of this policy will be the hard part, we think. It's due to begin next year. So this is a shout out. If there are any researchers or policy implementation gurus in the room who are willing to give us a hand, please get in touch. And also sort of linked to that, but not specifically connected to local government or only, but something that we should all look out for. Sometimes fees and charges inadvertently incentivize unhealthy choices. And we can see this in the state government food safety regulations relating to community fundraisers, specifically the simple sausage sizzle. So the no fee, no permit option actually nudges community groups towards running unhealthy barbecues, selling only sausages in bread with onions and sauce. We argue that other low risk items could be added to that category to enable healthier barbecue fundraisers. But I guess really my point in raising that is about the opportunities, but also the potential pitfalls of utilising fees, charges, permits, and other administrative levers to incentivise, push, pull healthy food options in private retail outlets. Now, lastly, supermarkets. I love the possibilities for massive change that can come from the reach of supermarkets. I'd spent a lot of my time thinking about them, but I also understand that this is a really new setting for health promotion and particularly for local government. Our control in these settings is very low. And so relationships and trust, as opposed to contracts and policies, have to underpin the approach. But we can still find strategic alignment. And in Greater Bendigo, we've demonstrated how supermarkets are willing and able to create healthier shopping environments. And that's a neat segue into the Healthy Supermarkets Community of Practice, which is a group of health promotion practitioners that learn together. We're actually holding our next meeting this coming Monday afternoon at lunchtime, focusing on forming partnerships with retailers. So if anyone would like to join in, please get in touch with Matt here. So those are really just a few examples of the many levers local councils have to influence healthy food retail. Most of the examples that I've given today, I hope you picked up, were actually in that structural level of policy planning and resource allocation / provision. And there are actually many more opportunities in that space. However, I think that the less visible levers like relationships and connections, power dynamics, and mental models are the foundation of really transformative systems change. And that's where a lot of our partners' efforts are focused. And I think where local councils can continue to increase their efforts. A big shout out in that space to Vic Health and Common Cause for their work on values-based messaging, specifically the work around framing healthy eating and harmful industries. So thanks for having us at your event, Victoria. It's been a privilege to share some of our community's story, but also to learn from the other amazing people here today. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Amy and Matt. It was fantastic to hear about Bendigo. You guys are an absolute inspiration, and I love hearing after all the work and development, what you're actually implementing. It's really, really exciting. And I love Bendigo. The food there is incredible. So thank you again. Okay. One sec. Now we have time for some questions. We're running really well on time. We have a bit less than 10 minutes. If anyone would like to ask any questions, as I mentioned, there's some questions in the chat which I will raise. One sec. I think I've lost the chat, sorry. 1 second. Okay. So Deb Cox, I think you raised a question. Are the big supermarkets a feature in the food hub model? And thanks, Leah, you answered that one. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or are you comfortable with that one?
It's a great question. Thank you, Deb. Nice to be connected again. It's been a few years. I mean, at the start of any project like this, you have an aspiration to be entirely inclusive. So you want to work with all of the businesses that are in this particular region. For people that don't know, Huon Valley is, you know, around 18,000 people live in the valley. It's the southernmost local council area in Australia. There's a lot of food production that goes on there. There's one Woolies in the entire local government area, and then there's actually more independents, and that's actually not unusual here in Tasmania. We don't quite have the domination of the big two, and we don't even have Aldi here. So it's easier often to work with the independent retailers, particularly here in Tassie, because they often have a value proposition around supporting local. So they'll be much easier to work with. In saying that though, Woolies, which is the big supermarket in the Huon Valley Council, they do promote themselves as supporting local producers, but that's often quite complicated in how you can work with them, because so many of the buying decisions are actually centralised and often out of Victoria. So it's harder for the manager of a local store to have much discretion in that way, but we'll certainly would intend to be as inclusive right from the get-go. And then you really have to see where the energy and alignment is as the project progresses.
Thanks very much, Leah. I have another question from Monica. Where should I look for more information about the active living census? I think that was for you, Matt.
There's
Amy.
a link. Yep. There's a link in the chat to the active living census for Bendigo, and that's a really good place to start. It'll take you to other links. The active living census was actually conducted across Bendigo, but 5 other LGAs at the same time. So start with Bendigo, but it'll send you to the other LGAs if you're interested.
Thanks, perfect. And thanks, Chanel, for posting the link there. I've got a question from Miranda. What are some of the other 5 narratives of the start, please?
Thanks, Vic. So some of the other narratives include get started now. So we've phrased all the narratives as recommendations. So that first one, I think, is something that a lot of people might connect with, which is that sometimes there's a lot of fear around getting started with changes, and often just starting with a small change is a bit of a proof of concept to all those involved that really it's not so bad and we can see some positive change, and that gives us confidence to go on and do something bigger. Another one is be prepared for diminishing returns on investment. And that's basically saying at some point you're going to have made so many changes that the remaining changes are going to be the really hard ones. And so you just need to be prepared for that. And that's just part of the normal process, but expectations need to be reasonable throughout the project. Another one is work with suppliers to overcome time and resource barriers. So we know that supply is critical in community organisations in terms of changing their food environments. And if you don't have a supplier who has the options that you need, then you might need to negotiate with that supplier or look at other options outside of that supplier, like joining a buyers group, for example, to pool your buying power with other small organisations to get access to healthy and tasty options and affordable options. And the last one is focus on the customer. And that is pretty self-explanatory, which is that for retailers and really for the ultimate target of any kind of healthy food retail intervention, it's all about the customer. And if you don't build trust and acceptability with the customer, then it's very difficult to have sustainable change. So thinking about in your selection of strategies, both the kinds of options that are available, is this what the customer demographic wants? And also thinking about, it's normal for customers to have some initial resistance and for retailers to be afraid of that. But what our work has shown is that over time, that small vocal minority seems to dampen down and the culture shifts such that healthy retail becomes the expectation. I think that was 5.
Perfect. Thanks, Miranda. Another question from Monica. I think it's to Matt and Amy. Have you noticed how many chocolates, lollies, etc. are on sale in supermarkets during lockdown? The aisle is full of yellow sale tags on most of items, and a Mars bar is cheaper than a big Granny Smith apple. I too like the idea of the reach of supermarkets. So it's probably more of a comment. I think we've all noticed that.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I also am really conscious of the fact that supermarkets are not making any money off those products that are on sale with very low margins. So I definitely take your point in terms of that, you know, throughout this recent period, we've seen like at least an anecdotal increase in those types of products being on special. But supermarkets are motivated to sell more of healthier products because they have higher margins. It leads to less waste. So although those types of you know, examples are like, oh, that's a pain, there's still lots of opportunity in that space, especially if you get the chance to actually talk with your supermarket retailer.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think we'll do one last question due to time and also to address the fact that, yes, the recording will be available up on the Nourish Network website for the recording for the webinar in the next week or so. And I'll send out a link for people to be able to find that. So one last question for Leah. For communities wanting to start out, what would be the first steps, please?
Oh, wow. Well, I always start with the data and with networks. So what does the data tell you about, you know, what might be some obvious issues in a region or a community that you're working with? And then the networks, you want to find out who are the people that have a natural alignment with resolving some of those issues. And really working those networks. And by that I mean you might know a couple of people, but you're also asking them about who they know who might also be good to bring into the fold. And certainly when we started the first concept planning phase for the Huon Valley Food Hub, Skills Tasmania came on board. Now, one person in the room had a connection with them, but actually that ended up being a really valuable connection. So yeah, work in networks, start with the data, and that's how you build some enthusiasm around it. And I think that it's harder for policymakers and grant givers to ignore and ask for funding that's really where there's a good sort of collection of people around it. It just seems to have a stronger foundation and they like that sort of thing.
I understand. Perfect. Okay, thank you. I think we'll wrap up now. I'll just share my screen one last time. Okay, as I mentioned, the webinar will be available. The recording will be made available on the Nourish Network website. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all our presenters. There's been some amazing content today, beautiful presentations and really, really inspiring information. And to thank Sian Norton as well for helping to moderate today. And if you'd like to learn anything more, please visit our website, nourishnetwork.org, or follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we would love to hear from you. So hopefully we hope to see you at our next event, and it might even be in person. So thank you everyone for your time. And if you have any other questions, get in touch with myself or the presenters. Thank you.